Hello, hello, hello. This is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and tonight on Saturdays, we like to talk about some TikTok videos, and let's TikTok about it. I have a fabulous guest tonight, Emily from the Equal Rights Institute. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Christina. It is so wonderful to be here tonight.
All right, so we're going to be, it's probably no surprise that we're going to be focusing on pro-life videos. We're going to be like random stuff about infrastructure or something crazy like that. It's going to be pretty focused on what you do, but really quickly, before we jump into it, people can find you. You run like the social media on like TikTok for the Equal Rights Institute and so on, but there's a website, it's just equalrightsinstitute.com.
Yes, it is. EqualRightsInstitute.com. You can also follow us on all of the platforms. Yes, I run our social media. I'm also a traveling speaker. I do a lot of speaking around the U.S., mainly college campuses, high schools, pro-life conferences, churches, you name it, training people in just how to have better conversations about abortion. That's what our content specializes on. And so you can find us all of those places online.
So the goal of the Equal Rights Institute is just to train people on how to make better arguments, obviously persuade people, but that's technically the end goal, to train other people to do what you guys do.
Yes, basically our motto is that we're trying to train pro-life people to think clearly about abortion themselves, to be able to reason honestly about it, like think through the arguments well, and then to be able to argue persuasively, be able to take those arguments and communicate them well. So it's both about actually knowing the arguments, but then also knowing how to effectively explain those arguments to someone else, how to use just practical dialogue strategies to get people's walls down and foster respectful and productive dialogue. And then we can actually use those arguments and make an impact if we've created that kind of productive conversation environment. So there's kind of two parts there to how you really do pro-life apologetics, how you effectively explain the pro-life position in a way that's going to be persuasive and really interesting to pro-choice people.
So would you, success wise, how I haven't found that it's kind of pretty easy to change people's hearts and minds, but like is this like a how difficult is what you're doing, I suppose?
Well, I would say that it is difficult in the sense of there's a lot of different pro-choice slogans. There's a lot of different talking points that you can learn how to respond to. And so it's difficult in that sense of like we put out a lot of content helping people just think well about all these different things someone might say. But it's also incredibly easy because so many things are just common sense in how to create a productive dialogue with someone. And yet we don't do them. There's all sorts of practical tips about how to bring people's walls down by asking good questions and using positive body language, bringing up common ground. There's all of these common sense things you can do in a conversation to help the other person calm down and get to a point where they can hear you. And all of those tips are incredibly easy. It's just a matter of remembering to do them while you have your head focused on the arguments they're making as well.
Okay. Somebody already has a question, so I might as well drop in
Awesome.
Some of us live in states, Colorado, where we have to give a legislative option to up the birth, because if it's a abolition or no restrictions, we will lose. How do we advocate for a middle ground? That's a good question.
Yeah, that is. I believe that we as pro-life people should always be trying to save as many lives as we can as fast as we can. But in some places, we're not going to be able to save all of the lives all at once. And that's kind of the idea of the incrementalist approach to pro-life legislation that a lot of pro-life organizations believe is the best way forward. The idea of incrementalism being, let's save as many lives as we can as fast as we can, with the hopes that eventually we can save them all. And so I wouldn't call something like maybe say a 16-week or a 24-week abortion ban something that's more in the middle. It's not doing an abolitionist, we're going to say no abortions, and it's not saying, we're going to have all abortions available. Some bill like that that's kind of in the middle basically isn't saying we're compromising, and we're not saying, okay, it's okay. I, as a pro-life person, don't think it's okay even before 16 weeks or before 24 weeks, but we are willing to put that law into place first in the hopes that we can put future laws into place. I think people on the left do that too with a lot of legislation that they want to get through. They're saying, well, I'm willing to, I'm going to put in the legislation I want here till X point. I'm really trying to push to go further, but I'm willing to put in an incrementalist step. It's a strategy that people on the left and right have used kind of for years, where they don't want to compromise. They're not willing to say, I'm okay with the rest of those abortions, or I'm not okay with the rest of those, whatever the topic is, but I am willing to work with you and at least start somewhere and see if I can keep pushing the line. So I wouldn't quite call it middle ground, but I think that there is a place for that kind of incrementalist legislation, and it's really proved effective in a lot of states at saving as many lives as we can as fast as we can.
I think one thing when you are talking about the incrementalism, it made me think of William Wilberforce and his really passionate lifelong fight to end slavery in the UK. And so, I mean, he passionately like, it's evil, etc., blah, blah, blah. And he was like kind of getting nowhere, and they had to strategically find another way, kind of like a backdoor to end up ending slavery. And so there's a really good movie, Amazing Grace. Eoin something, who played Mr. Fantastic in the original like Fantastic Four films. So if you haven't seen it, it's a great film about his life. And it's sometimes you got to be a little more strategic about the things that you want done. Like you said, folks on the left do, I think they do it faster and more aggressive, but sometimes they're pretty stealthy with the things that they do, but it's a long game. But Roe v. Wade is an example of something that happened like, sweepingly, as Ginsburg said. She thought it was like a lot that happened at once. So I think that was a great question. Thank you. So speaking of Roe v. Wade, so we're gonna go ahead and play our first video. So there's a lot of people very afraid about it. So this is gonna be our first one for the night.
What will happen when Roe v. Wade is overturned? Yeah, I said when, not if. That wasn't a mistake. Our Supreme Court doesn't care about reproductive rights anymore. Have you noticed? And it doesn't mean that we can't still protect abortion. That's a topic for another day. It just means we can't rely on the Supreme Court. Number one, 26 states will either likely or very likely ban abortion immediately the moment Roe v. Wade is overturned, because 21 of those states already have laws on the books that would make this a near certainty. Number two, in those states that I mentioned, that will affect 36 million people with uteruses of reproductive age who can't then access legal abortion. Number three, driving distances for safe legal abortion will dramatically increase for certain people in the United States. Example, in Florida, a one-way trip to get a legal abortion will now take over 575 miles. Great. Number four, this will expose more pregnant people to domestic violence and abuse within their households. Because they're pregnant, they are less likely to leave their partners and stay in an abusive relationship, including the children that they may previously already have. Number five, this will worsen poverty for uterus owners. Studies have shown that people who wanted an abortion but were not able to access it or were turned away were 4 times more likely to live in poverty. If you're not pissed off by this, do you even have a pulse? This doesn't mean we give up, my friends. Stay tuned for more.
So, first things first, do you actually think it's going to get overturned? Because there's some people concerned because the ruling hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that concern. I do think it is going to be overturned. I think that there's multiple theories out there as to why it hasn't come out yet. Some are more interesting, I think, than others. But I am currently of the opinion, especially based on listening to the entire oral arguments and kind of getting to hear the justices and where they were at. Obviously, the leak of the Supreme Court draft played into that, but I was of the belief, just from the moment of hearing those oral arguments, that this was going to really result in an overturn of Roe. And so I think the reason it's getting delayed is partially because they want to make sure they have all their ducks in the row. They want to really put out the best version of this draft because they know so many people are waiting on this anxiously, and people got to read the leak, and so they want to really make sure this is good. Also, waiting till the end of the month allows them to kind of get out of Dodge, get out of town, get their children out of the schools in that area. There's a lot of reasons it would make sense to wait if the ruling is going the, getting rid of Roe direction. So I don't think that the rumors, the theories I've heard for it going the other direction are as convincing. It's certainly possible, but I am currently in the camp that I do think Roe is going to be overturned.
Well, I thought from the oral arguments, I'm like, how could they keep this? Because it's
the oral arguments were pretty obvious. It was shockingly obvious.
Yeah, there just weren't good. I mean, people who are honest. I mean, I know people want to protect Roe v. Wade, but there's just a lot of not good legal reasoning in it.
Mhm.
And there's other people like Ginsburg, etc., who they want the reproductive rights, as they call them, even though reproduction's already happening, but whatever. But they acknowledge that there were issues with it. So and then people say things like Roe v. Wade, like this is what people want, and I'm like, but most people don't want abortion. I mean, there's a huge chunk of the country that don't want abortions past 15 weeks. I'm like, that's
Mhm.
like what Dobbs was at. So people don't even know what they're advocating for.
The large majority of the population does not actually understand what is in Roe versus Wade. They've done polls for years asking people, do you think that Roe should be overturned? And overwhelmingly people say no. And then they ask them another question like, do you think abortion should be available at X point of pregnancy? They like try to figure out what people's actual views are on abortion. And they completely contradict themselves.
Yeah.
That just shows the vast majority of the population doesn't know what's in Roe. And that's a problem. I mean, I think the vast majority of the population isn't involved enough in politics, period, and don't know enough about what's happening in government in general.
Yeah.
But right now, especially, I think we're seeing that as there's a lot of misunderstanding about what Roe is and what Roe isn't, and why it's actually going to be overturned, assuming that is the direction it goes.
So do you have any thoughts on the TikTok and some of the things that she was saying about the domestic abuse and other sort of devastating things that will happen if Roe v. Wade is overturned?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of negative effects that are going to happen if Roe is overturned. It will do some other things. I still want Roe to be overturned, and we can get into why. However, I think that the pro-life movement needs to absolutely step up into the plate and help to fix some of the things that might be caused by Roe being overturned, such as people that are going to be having a family that can't afford to right now. There are a huge chunk of people. I believe this last stat that I saw was about 75% of women who have abortions identify financial concerns as one of many reasons that they're having the abortion. And so if we can find ways to help alleviate those concerns, both during pregnancy and after pregnancy, we can help to create a society in which abortion is not only illegal, but also unthinkable. Like no one feels like they're in a situation where they have to have an abortion. And so I think pro-choice people are rightly calling on pro-lifers and saying, okay, if you're going to do this, you need to step up to the plate. Obviously, there are people who are doing that call to pro-lifers in a not very nice way.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of not good things, but they are right to call on pro-lifers. And the pro-life movement is very much so stepping up to the plate in many ways. It's a conversation among all of the pro-life organizations. I can tell you right now that there are lots of things going back and forth. There's lots of organizations that have put out statements, that are putting out statements, that are starting to advocate for legislation, trying to kind of create this society where we don't have those issues that she's talking about, at least the issues in the latter half. Obviously, her first issue is like, all these women aren't going to have access to abortion. Yes, that is a good thing.
Yeah.
But the latter half of the video, where she was bringing up the domestic abuse cases and the poverty, those are things that the pro-life movement is prepared to be helping with. And I mean, just think about the millions and millions of dollars that go into the abortion industry now. If we can reroute those funds into actually fixing these situations, along with having the existing pro-life movement step up and help into those situations, like there is so much room to create beneficial systems to prevent all of those things from happening and help them if they start happening right away. Like we're here, and it is a good call to pro-life people. We do need to be stepping up to the plate, and I'm prepared to do that.
I'm also like, I don't like, and there'll be other arguments that mention income, and I understand that's something that people say. I don't know if everyone who says that doesn't mean that they're necessarily in like abject poverty. They might be going through a downturn, but we, like my family, there's 7 of us, 6 girls, 1 boy, and my parents did use protection. They said nothing would stop us from coming, and we had some rough times, and some really rough times at times. I'm just like, I can't imagine like giving that up, like giving up like my youngest sister, for example, so we could have had things a little bit easier, or so I'm just like, it really kind of creeps me out when people talk about that.
Sure.
And then also what she said about the domestic abuse, I'm like, that's, if these women who are, I think anecdotal stuff like that is probably the more compelling arguments, I suppose. But that's not a good situation for women to be in, to be like, yep, that's why we need abortion, so they won't stay in their domestic abuse situation, or they might stay in their domestic. I'm just like, can we just help the woman, find a way to help the woman, so they're not in that situation? Because you're just, I mean, creating another victim along the way. And I've talked to women who've had abortions because they thought that they were with a partner, they were afraid for what could happen with their children. And that's something they can really, really empathize with. But I'm like, you shouldn't have to go to an abortion clinic when you're at such a mental dire strait, and they're like, yep, sign away your kid's life. Let's help the woman.
Yes, exactly. There is so much that we are doing and we can be doing to help women in that situations. Abortion is not the solution there.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to another video.
All right.
Okay, so this one's kind of long because it goes through evictionism, and someone did ask to cover it, so they're gonna explain what it is.
Here we go. Let's do it.
Evictionism in 3.
Hold on. Wait.
Here's evictionism in 3 minutes. Evictionism is just the libertarian answer to the issue of abortion. It operates under 2 notions. The first being that the fetus is a trespasser, that it is not there consensually. And the second being that the non-aggression principle is true. This video is going to be tasked with under those 2 assumptions. If you want to go into why the non-aggression principle is not true, just go to my prior video talking about argumentation ethics. Well, with these 2 principles true, we are then cast with the question, if there is somebody who is initiating force against the mother, what means is she ethically allowed to take to end such an initiation? Taking this particular and expanding it to a more broad level, expanding this into a more broad sense, the question then becomes, what means are retaliators allowed to take to exclude initiators from using their property? What is the justified means of retaliatory force? To answer such a question, we have to refer back to the NAP. The NAP's entire function is the preservation of property rights. Thus, any theory attempted at justifying what means are allowed retaliation would have to preserve property rights. It would have to be in the interest of preserving the property and the property owner's claim to said property. In the issue of exchanging of force, there are 2 preservations which have to be made. The first is the preservation of the property owners, the retaliator, and the second being of the initiator, the person making the counterclaim. The issue is both of these claims cannot matter to the same degree. And this comes about as a recognition of the homesteading principle, or the first use principle of libertarianism. By virtue of me having a claim to myself, I am justified in excluding others from using it. You trying to appropriate my resources are a latecomer, and thus are not justified in excluding me from my own resources. Thus, my claim takes primacy according to yours. Applying this to the exchange of force, the preservation of my property rights comes as a primacy. It comes first compared to the rights of you. This is not to say that your rights do not matter, but preserving my property rights is the first most concern. Translating this into principle is evictionism's position. It would arrive at the conclusion that the justified means to end an initiation are the gentlest means necessary to end such an initiation. The necessary to end initiation comes about as a recognition of preserving the property owner's rights, and the gentlest means comes about as a recognition of the retaliator's rights. Any principle in contradiction to this one would not be a pro-libertarian principle, as it would have to either go against the interest of the property owner or the principle of first use, both of which would go against the NAP entirely. Let's give an example. Arguments like proportional force do not take into account the primacy of the property owner. By not allowing the necessary eviction, you negate the very purpose of the NAP, preserving property rights. It forces altruism, and it forces positive rights. Now, internal discussion of how this principle applied is a different issue, but it still stands. Not holding gentlest means necessary is a contradiction to liberty, freedom, and bodily autonomy. That's evictionism.
So, yeah, long video. So could you explain the concept of gentlest means? Are you familiar with what they mean? It's so weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, typically the way that argument actually appears in normal pro-choice people talking is in the idea that the fetus is a trespasser into her body, and therefore the gentlest way you can get it out, you have to be able to get it out somehow. And unfortunately, there's no other way to get it out except an abortion, which is seen as a pretty gentle way to do it, especially if it's happening early on in the pregnancy. They're seeing that as kind of being the best possible way to get that fetus out of her body. They're just kind of unplugging it, essentially, in the verbiage that they're trying to use. And so that is allowed under the evictionism principle. That would be how I would say I hear the argument most often, not going through all of the crazy words in libertarian language that he was trying to use. If I just hear that argument on my TikTok feed through all the pro-choice comments, that's usually how it's going to be explained.
So, okay, well, what about that? Like, let's push back against that.
Yeah, let's do it. So I usually start by explaining that I have a lot of common ground with that view. I don't think that people, generally speaking, should be forced to like donate their bodies to other people. The whole idea kind of originated with Judith Jarvis Thomson. She's a very famous pro-choice philosopher, and she was kind of the one that kind of came up with this idea of the right to refuse argument. The idea that you have the right to refuse the use of your body to someone else that's trying to use it, which is kind of where evictionism came out of. And I have a lot of common ground with that. I don't think people should be like forced to donate their kidney to someone else, for example. But I think that situation is inherently a little bit different from pregnancy. And here's why. Let's say that you, Christina, were dying of kidney failure. Let's make this real. Let's say that Christina's dying of kidney failure.
It's getting bleak though.
I know it is. And let's say that I am the only person in the whole world who's capable of donating my kidney to you for whatever weird reason. I don't know. I'm the only person in the world who's capable. I think I hypothetically have three options. I can either help you, which would be me choosing to donate my kidney to you. Super nice. Yay, you don't die. I could not help you, which would be me refusing to donate my kidney to you. You would die. Very sad. Maybe I'm like a bad person now because I refused, but I don't think I should be legally like in trouble with the law or something because of that. And then three, hypothetically, I could kill you. Like I could just come at you right now and kill you. It would completely eliminate my, like, I wouldn't have to be embarrassed because I said no to you. It would eliminate the problem completely. Hypothetically, I have all three of those options. We all know the third one, killing you, is not a legal option available to me, right? But the first two are. The problem is, I don't think all three of those options are available in every scenario. And this is where evictionism really comes in. Like, let's imagine a totally different hypothetical. This one's way more fun. You don't have to die. Let's say that you, Christina, have a boat. Like, you get super rich. You get this, like, giant yacht. It's epic. It's amazing. All right? And you take your boat out into the middle of the ocean. And as you are in the middle of the ocean on your boat, you discover that there is a toddler on your boat. Like this toddler had been like playing hide and go seek with his siblings on the docks, and then he'd wandered onto your boat and hid in a closet and then promptly fell asleep, which toddlers totally do. And so you were out in the middle of the ocean and now you have this toddler. Normally, I think you have the right to evict people off of your property. And like you have a right to basically not be having to take care of this toddler. However, I think there's only two actual options in this scenario. Like there's only two things you start with. I think you can either help that toddler by allowing the toddler to exist on your boat until you take the boat back to shore, at which point I don't think you have to have any further legal obligation to that toddler. Then I think you can put the toddler off the boat and like call the police and they will go take care of the toddler. Or hypothetically, you can throw the toddler overboard. You can kill the toddler. I don't think that should be a legal option. Like that is the only way to quote unquote evict this toddler right now, is to throw them overboard where you know they will drown. That is killing. You would go to jail for that. You go to prison for that. Like that is not acceptable. If we had a way, we could like Star Trek beam this toddler off of your boat and onto shore, and then you don't have to deal with the toddler anymore and the toddler will be fine. Like I'm totally fine with that. But the problem is we don't have that option in the first place. And so it is not that I think you have an obligation to help people. I'm not arguing that we have an obligation to do like altruism to other people. I don't think you have an obligation to help the toddler. I think you have an obligation to not kill that toddler. And unfortunately, if there's only two options, help and kill, then, I mean, essentially you're obligated to help because you are obligated to not kill. And that situation, toddler on the boat, is way more analogous to pregnancy than anything else, than like the whole kidney donation thing. Because in pregnancy, there are only those two options to start with. You can either help by allowing the child to exist in your body for 9 months, after which I don't think you have to have any further legal obligation to that child if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Or, hypothetically, you can kill that child. You can have an abortion. There is no not help option. There's no Star Trek beaming thing. If there was, totally fine with that. Like, if we could Star Trek beam into an artificial womb, which, I mean, goats have been born in artificial wombs before. That is a thing. We could eventually have that technology for fetuses. And I would be more, like, so fine with that. I'm not trying to force anyone to use their body in a way that they don't want. I am saying you have an obligation to not kill other humans. And so that's where I think the evictionism argument falls apart, is you don't have the right to evict anyone. You do not have the right to evict a completely innocent toddler on your boat in the middle of the ocean and like drown them. That's not a right that you have. And so that, being way more analogous to pregnancy, is more of the issue here.
We also just don't evict people without some kind of legal action as well.
That's true.
We don't, like, squatter. You don't kill slit a squatter's throat and just toss them out your house. Is that what you do? You got to go through a process. So, and then with abortion, like if you took which most of them are done with like the pill, which basically cuts off the nutrients instead of denying the resources and stuff, and then you have the contractions. But I mean, evictionism would just, the idea is that you just toss them out, and if they don't survive, that's on them, kind of thing. But that's not what happens with abortion pills and stuff. You do kill them intentionally first. So that's maybe they could argue that it should be differently, but that's not actually what happens with the procedure. So that's weird too. But also the trespassing thing doesn't make sense to me either.
Yeah, I agree. There's like multiple problems here, but I think you are right in pointing out that one of the biggest ones is just purely how the abortion procedure is performed. And you're correct. The first kind of trimester of pill abortions are happening. Usually they're basically, as I described them, happening via suffocation, where how they get their oxygen, which is through the placenta, is removed from them. And you can certainly make an argument. I've heard pro-choice people make an argument that all of the current abortion procedures, those are wrong. What you would need to do is literally just take the embryo of the fetus out and just set it on the table and let it die. That, in their mind, is as close as you can get to evictionism. The only problem with that is we wouldn't apply that exact principle anywhere else. Like if I have a newborn and my newborn is like safely in my crib in like the other room, and I take that newborn and I just go drop it in the ocean, I cannot suddenly say, oh, I didn't kill it, the ocean did. Like, that's not how that works. You take an underdeveloped human and you put them in an environment where you know they can't survive. The precise reason an infant cannot survive even in a pool is because it's too underdeveloped to swim. Like, its lungs are too underdeveloped. And so if I take it out of an environment in which it's growing and I drop it somewhere I know it can't survive, that is still killing it. And so even if we hypothetically came up with this other abortion procedure where we just took it out and set it on the table, that's the exact same thing as dropping a newborn in a pool. Still counts as killing.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I mean, I think maybe like in cases like him, I mean, he obviously can't have a baby himself, but I maybe like it's a fun sort of mental exercise. I mean, there's other libertarians who are like non-aggression pact. It doesn't make sense. Like abortion doesn't make sense because it's a unjustified aggression against the baby. But I don't know, other people who mention that sort of stuff, I don't know how deeply they really believe that philosophy. It sounds so ludicrous to me to say it's the gentlest means possible. I'm like, you couldn't wait like 23 weeks or something and
Right. Arguably, the gentlest means possible is to allow the child to continue to exist, and then like once it's viable, you can take it out, it can survive on its own, and you don't have to like that is removing it from your body in a way where that child does not come by harm.
So I don't get it. But someone asked about an argument for late term abortions because people claim different reasons for that. But we're going to get into it because there's a video dealing with that. So
okay, great.
1 second.
You have to ask why Keisha Atkins and other women are looking for abortions after 20 weeks. And do you know what the reason is? It's because abortion facilities are not available to them. This is why I'm pro-abortion and not pro-choice, because pro-choice comes from a position of privilege. It simply states that just because it's legal, women can make that choice, whereas this is not true. A lot of women don't have access to abortion, and hence situations like Keisha Atkins happen. Unfortunately, pro-lifers like yourself, by banning abortions, are increasing circumstances under which Keisha Atkins died. Because when abortions are banned, women will still go looking for abortions, and it's going to take them longer to find providers. So those abortions will happen later and later, and those complications will end up in their death. Making your argument pro-abortion.
So you did a video that I really, really liked. And I went in and Stitch was like, this is a great video. Listing just some of the reasons why people actually have late term abortions. And a lot of those reasons are the same reasons that people would have in like the first trimester. So it's not always about access. Are you familiar with Keisha Atkins case?
I'm not familiar with her specific story, no.
So she was 24. She was 24 weeks, and
Okay.
she was a student, and she had an abortion, and it ended up getting botched, and I guess they did it with like the lethal injection for the baby, and it ended up poisoning her too. And so like 3 days later, she went back to the clinic and stuff, and she didn't end up surviving, so her family ended up suing. And so I guess the person mentioned her to just be like, hey, abortion is dangerous, and then she went ahead and blamed people who want to deny access, and that's where we are from here. But I don't know all the reasons why she waited 24 weeks. Like I have a friend who had an abortion. She's pro-life now, but she had an abortion at about like 19, 20 weeks, and it was like 2021. But she just kind of wanted a blank slate, is how she described it, why she wanted one. And
Yeah.
she just kind of waited because she didn't kind of know how to break the news, and she was just kind of still thinking it over. So women have it for different reasons. So I want to take it from there.
Sure. So, first of all, let me say that story is absolutely tragic of Keisha Atkins. And I think as pro life people, we need to make it very, very clear that we don't want any women to die in an abortion, whether that's a legal or an illegal abortion. I don't want women dying. I think sometimes pro choice people will think or see a stereotype of the other side that says pro-life people want women to die because that's just punishment for what they're doing. Like I've heard pro-choice people say that, like, no, you want women to die in abortion so that they're being punished. I'm like, that's really not it at all. I don't want any woman to die, and I'm really that's a tragic situation. And there are stories like that where women have died in abortions, and that's one reason that many pro-life organizations have focused on trying to expose some of the not good situations that happen in abortion clinics, because there are many abortion practitioners that are not doing things safely and have resulted in women having severe complications and or death from abortions. And the pro-life movement does not want that to happen. They want those providers to be shut down so that we don't have more women being harmed. That being said, back to kind of the reasons that people have abortions. Yes, I have a TikTok on that. I want to give a shout out to Secular Pro-Life, incredible organization. My friend Monica Snyder is the executive director over there, and Secular Pro-Life has the best resources on late-term abortion stuff. I go to them for all of my statistics. They have done an extensive amount of research on kind of the reasons that people have late-term abortions, the statistics on how many there are, all that kind of stuff. They've looked into all of the studies and compiled it on their website. So if you literally go to their website and search late-term abortion, it will come up. There are multiple studies on there that they link to explaining that basically the reasons that women have late-term abortions are not statistically different from the reasons that women have abortions earlier on. There's this huge myth that people only have late-term abortions for medical necessity reasons. If the woman's life is in danger or the fetus's life is in danger, that's the only reason people ever have abortions after that case. And that's just not statistically accurate. And Secular Pro-Life has done a great job of getting all those studies in one place for you. So if you're looking for late-term abortion stats, Secular Pro-Life is the place you want to go.
Yeah, I think you quoted in your TikTok a Washington Post article, if I'm not mistaken, that listed some of the reasons. And I just thought that made, I guess I just didn't have that source. So I was glad to have it, because I'm like, when people argue viability, to me that doesn't make sense, because I'm like, the baby's still in there, so it's what does it matter if you think
If it's all
viability?
about my body, my choice, then
Yes.
it's still in my body at viability.
So, and I'm like, the same reason, like if a woman has an abortion early because of economic reasons, or a relationship, didn't work out or something, those things can still happen later on if she's at 24 weeks or something like that. So to
Right.
me, it didn't make any sense. So I felt, I guess, validated when I saw your video. I'm like, yes.
Yes, that Washington Post thing isn't there. There's a couple of other studies. Like, there's a bunch of stuff on secular pro-life, and I pulled, I think, maybe 3 different things in that specific TikTok, kind of 3 strongest things that I saw, but there's a whole bunch of them on their website.
So it was some good stuff. I hope that if you look at those resources, that answers the question. But it really is a myth that people do it for medical necessity. That is a very, 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 very low statistic. And there's like, is it like 7% of abortions are that late term?
I believe it's less than that these days. I don't have the exact stat off the top of my head, but last time I looked, I believe it was something more like 3% of all abortions were after that time. And then when you look at the kind of the reasons people have it after that time, they line up with the same exact reasons people have earlier.
Yeah, I mean, and that's still we have hundreds of thousands of abortions.
Right.
So somebody out there do the math, and that's still a lot of kids, being brutally killed, very late in the game. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's watch another one. Here we go.
What happens when abortion?
Hold on.
What happens when abortions are illegal? When abortions are illegal, pregnancies still happen, and people still need abortions. If they can't happen safely in a hospital, they will happen elsewhere, and as a result, more people will die or be injured. This year, many states have enacted harmful bills that will eliminate abortion access for millions of people across the country. In Texas, people have been denied their constitutional right to abortion by a law that bans abortion at 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is before a lot of people even know that they're pregnant. This spring, the Supreme Court has the opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade, which could lead to 26 more states banning abortion. When people are denied abortion and give birth, children are at a greater risk of poverty. Everyone, no matter where they live or how much money they make, deserves access to essential health care, which includes abortion, free of barriers or political roadblocks.
So I think it's kind of wild when people make that argument that more people will die, because I'm just like, I think that argument only works if you don't think that the unborn are people. So there's that.
There is that. You're right. The argument only works if you don't think the unborn are people.
So what are your thoughts?
Sure. So I think that the kind of banning abortion just causes abortion to be less safe, therefore we shouldn't have it. The back alley abortion argument essentially is flawed on a couple of different levels. The first one that I usually start by pointing out is the idea that the pro-choice lobby's narrative itself contradicts their argument. Before I even get into pro-life arguments, I like to bring this up because the pro-choice lobby has been claiming for years and years and years that the abortion pill is one of the safest things on the entire planet. Like, let's be real, okay? If Roe's overturned tomorrow, and let's say, like half the states ban abortion, like the earlier video was saying, 26 states, you can't get it. How would a woman in that state get an abortion if she wants one? She's going to order the abortion pill online to be delivered from another state. The FDA has already approved abortion pills by mail. You're going to get that, mailed into you. It's not going to be that hard. So realistically, that's how the vast majority of abortions are going to occur. But at the same time, the abortion lobby is saying that pill, that precise thing that's going to be mailed to her, is like the safest thing on the planet. I was reading, there's a NARAL fact sheet. I actually have a picture of it in one of my TikToks, where they say that only 8 women have died from taking RU486, the abortion pill, between, I think it was the years 1996 and 2011. 8 women total from taking the abortion pill in that entire period of time. They say it is safer statistically than Tylenol to take. More people die every year from taking Tylenol than they do from taking the abortion pill. So if that is true, pro-choice people, I'm very confused how you can say both of these things are true simultaneously, okay? You're telling me that if abortion becomes illegal, millions of women are going to die. Like, so many women are going to die from having unsafe abortions. And then you're simultaneously telling me that the exact thing that is apparently going to kill them, this abortion pill, is so safe that the FDA doesn't need to be regulating it. We should be able to get it over the counter, just like have it by mail show up at your house. You can't have both of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
So if the pro-choice lobby has been lying for all of these years about how safe the abortion pill is, that's highly concerning.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing that makes sense if you're telling me that this many women are going to die. Otherwise, like, you just can't have both those things at the same time. That's just not how this works.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something to really consider. And I know people go back to the time like, oh, when all this stuff was happening, all these women were dying, but it's like there's been a lot of medical advancements since then, and really has nothing to do with like abortion itself, or like penicillin, right? Like the
Yep. It's literally okay. Here's level 2 about why the argument is flawed. There's a lot of levels. So level 1, pro-choice narrative contradicts it. Level 2, if you actually look at the statistics for women dying in abortions, we do have statistics about how many women have died in illegal abortions. I've always found it kind of weird that pro-choice people have said, well, we don't know how many people were having illegal abortions before Roe. It's impossible to know how many people have it when it's illegal. So therefore, it must be happening at the same rate. Well, they like discount any potential statistics. And then as soon as we start saying women died pre-Roe, now suddenly those statistics are very valid. The statistics we have about women died. We have statistics for the whole thing, guys. We know how many illegal abortions were happening pre-Roe. And if you look, you can see there's graphs about the number of women who died from illegal abortions. And the number did this like insane drop off way earlier than 1973 because of the advent of antibiotics. 1973, when you look at the graph, I have a TikTok on this on my platform too. There, like 1973 does not even make a blip on the graph.
Yeah.
The maternal mortality rate, or the mortality rate for having abortions, was so low after we got past like 1960. Just because of the antibiotics. And so there was no dramatic change. There were not millions of women dying before Roe. The numbers did not change. We also know that the number of abortions doubled once Roe became law, more or less. So we know for a fact that there were tons of women who did not want an abortion when it was illegal. And we can only assume that if abortion was illegal today, the abortion rate is going to go down. It makes absolutely no sense to say the exact same number of women will have an abortion, because I've talked to a lot of people that have had abortions, and they have told me they wouldn't have done it if it was against the law. And so, yes, there will still be some women who are desperate enough to get an abortion. No one is saying that's not true. But the numbers will go down, and there will not be this crazy number of women dying from it. That's like level 1 and level 2 of why this doesn't make sense. Level 3 of why this doesn't make sense is now where I get into the actual pro-life argument here. And I always like to start with a little bit of a soundbite. I say, I don't want any women to die in an abortion, whether it's legal or illegal. But I also don't think that we can essentially hold the law hostage because there are citizens threatening to hurt themselves. Like, if abortion is what I believe it to be, if it is a human rights violation, like I to believe it to be, and you, pro-choice person, might not agree with me about that, we can totally go talk about that. But if I'm right about what it is, then I can't think of any other human rights violations that we would keep legal just to make it safer for people to keep doing it. And so there's a problem of what actually is abortion. And now we're down to the root conversation here, where we get beyond what the pro-choice talking points have been in the statistics to what really is going on. And is abortion the human rights violation I believe it to be? Because if it is, then this back alley abortion argument doesn't hold water. We wouldn't keep another human rights violation legal just to make it safer for people to keep doing it.
Yeah, another thing when people talk about how all these women are going to die, I'm like, I think they're admitting something that's very telling and concerning, because they're saying women who have abortions, and there's so many of them that are such in a desperate state that they'd be willing to hurt themselves, risk killing themselves. And given that kind of desperation they're in, isn't it better that we give them some kind of aid, some kind of help, rather than sending them to a butcher? Yeah. Like again, help the woman. Can we find a way to help the woman? Like, I'm like, that's not the flex you think it is. That's it's really heartbreaking to think that they're, and now I don't if it was banned, I don't believe there'd be all these vast numbers, because like you said, there's just women who wouldn't do it, who wouldn't go. There's people who would take better precautions to not get pregnant as well. Maybe not, they'd make that guy wrap that up or something. I don't understand all these women out here in the streets let these dudes like do a modern warrior on them. I don't understand that. Not just for this purpose of getting pregnant, but like STDs and etc. It's just beyond me. I don't understand.
Right.
But I think people would take better care of themselves and just have more precautions. I don't believe you'd have millions of. It just doesn't make sense, and it's just a talking point, a really hysterical talking point, but it's one that's repeated over and over and over again. But again, just help the women. I know women who've been in like really, really dire circumstances, and there's some people who just treat it as, unfortunately, some kind of birth control. But just let's help the woman. Let's help the woman. I want to play. I don't know if you've seen this guy before,
right.
but he's had some arguments, man.
Okay, I'm ready.
For pro-life, Christian, conservative, Republican, whatever the heck you call yourself. And I want some actual, thought-out, genuine, real responses to this. Stitch, duet, comment, whatever. So, with Roe v. Wade being overturned, because if that's what's gonna happen, they're most likely gonna start expanding what is considered to be an abortion. Which means that contraceptives are most likely next on the chopping block. So my question to the pro-lifers is, where do we draw the line? Where does it stop? So let's say that your world actually comes to fruition, and we have this world where women are popping out babies, you've got the nuclear family, no abortion, no contraceptives. It's a paradise. Where do we...
I'm just gonna stop it real quick. I just think it's so funny. It's like a nuclear family. I'm just like...
Yeah, as if that's a horrible thing. Okay.
I'm gonna keep going though.
Draw the line. Where does it end? I mean, houses have a limit to the amount of people that can be housed within them. Couples don't just stop having, intercourse after they've had like 3 or 4 kids. They keep going, but they use contraceptives to stop themselves from continuing to get pregnant over and over. So what happens next? So if mom and dad are together, they're financially stable, but they really would not be able to take on another child. And like, they're married and everything, live together, nice house, but again, they just can't take on another child, and they get pregnant. What happens then? They have young children. Yay! We're getting another sibling. Oh no, we're actually giving this one up for adoption, Susie. Sorry. How is little Susie gonna feel when their sibling has to be given up for adoption because mom and dad can't bear to take on another child? Like, what's gonna happen when people have 16 kids that they can barely keep track of? What then? Seems to me like this plan wasn't really well thought out, and that maybe, just maybe, saving and protecting children wasn't the point after all.
Yeah.
That was a leap.
I know. By the end, I'm like, what were we even talking about here?
Contraceptives. That's where we started.
So is that your paradise? Is that the pro-life paradise of no contraception and everyone like 19 kids and counting? Like,
No.
I don't know.
That's not it. That's really not it, guys. I really genuinely hope that a lot of people duetted and stitched that video and gave him some answers, because that is not what pro-life people are going for. It's actually pretty simple. There's a little complex piece here, and I'll get to that. But where we draw the line is not that difficult. I am not trying to make contraceptives illegal. Let me be super clear about that. Now let me explain what I mean. So there are basically 2 kinds of things that people call contraceptives, which is super confusing. And so if we divide them all up, basically what I want to have happen, if I was like the benevolent dictator of the world, this is what I would do. I would take all the things people call birth control, contraceptives, whatever, and I would divide them into 2 categories. We've got the category of things that I call true contraceptives. In other words, they are the true actual meaning of the word contraceptive, which means to prevent conception. And so those are the things that are literally preventing conception from having ever occurred. Classic example would be a condom. It doesn't always do a great job, but like that is a thing that is literally trying to prevent conception. Then we've got other things that are capable of killing the embryo. In other words, capable of killing a biological human once it already exists. That is an abortion. I believe that killing other humans is wrong, should be illegal, killing innocent humans. And we can go into all my other arguments about abortion, but if I'm talking to a pro-choice person, we've usually already done that. They understand why I am pro-life. And so it makes sense that where we draw the line is it whether or not that human exists. If the human already exists, I believe it is wrong to kill it. And so we've got some types of birth control, contraceptives, whatever, people call them different things, which is not helpful, which is why I want to create these two categories and actually identify what is a true contraceptive, what is preventing conception, and what is performing an action once the human already exists. The reason this is complicated is that there's a whole bunch of things in the middle. There's this gray area of things that we don't know what they do, genuinely. We're like, does this cause an early abortion? We're not really sure. And so I think what needs to happen is this gray area, we need some really ethical research. Don't ask me how. I'm not a biologist. I don't know how to do ethical research on that, but that's what we need. Is I want ethical research on this to figure out what they do so that we can successfully put them in the two categories. This category that actually causes an abortion, that needs to be illegal, just like abortions, for the exact same reason. But this category, the things that are actually contraceptives, I don't think those should be illegal. A lot of people have religious reasons they don't want to use these. That's fine. I'm not saying everyone should use these, whatever. Yeah. But I don't think that these should be illegal because the human doesn't exist yet. Like I have yet to hear a compelling argument for why true contraceptives should be illegal. I've heard lots of arguments about why people shouldn't use them, why they're dangerous, why they're against people's religion, all those kinds of things, plenty of those. But I've yet to hear an argument about why this category should actually be illegal that I think works. And so I don't think that. I'm not trying to make contraceptives illegal. The line is pretty darn clear, and that's just once the human has started to exist.
Yeah. So I don't, like, again, like I know there's people who have them for religious reasons and or don't want them, but even still, there's like, Albany Rose. I don't know if you follow her at all, but
I do.
I mean, so she talks about how you can watch your period and your flow and other kind of stuff like that, and even like manage and
natural family planning is a thing that plenty of people on the religious right talk about and use effectively. Like that's a thing that goes kind of in the true contraceptive category.
Yeah, so I don't understand where they get off on this kind of stuff. Now this guy, he said some off the wall bonker thing. I don't usually reply to him because he did one video where he said he doesn't like to argue with pro-life women because he thinks we all are just like listening to our husbands and we're brainwashed. So
that's
sexist.
Also, can I just say, if I understand people on the right do this too all the time. People on the left and the right do this thing where we assume that we know about an entire category of people on the other side, and we just lump them all together, and we're like, you think differently than me, therefore you must be blah. And we just like assume all people like that fit under one label. Like if you claim to understand fully an entire group of people, then you're either lying or completely just that, like you don't have a grip of reality, basically. People on the right do that, people on the left do that. Saying that all pro-life women are just being controlled by the patriarchy is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, especially our husbands. I don't know where he is out there somewhere. I've yet to meet him, but I'm like, maybe I don't know, getting the instructions, subliminal messages. I don't know.
Yes, you're getting subliminal messages from the patriarchy.
So yeah, it's that, and even so, if the kids kept coming, it's just not good reasons to be like, yep, we got to get rid of you. Like, there's things that we should figure out. Like, I know times are really tough right now with supply chain and all the other kind of stuff, but as a society, like, is there, like, do we need to do kind of more family planning with farming and just other things like that to make sure that we can sustain ourselves or whoever comes along after that? But and that utopia weirdness isn't going to happen what he described, because we're not getting rid of contraception. That's not what we want. But it's it's still not a good reason to just be like, yep, them kids gotta go.
Yeah,
Did you see,
exactly.
did you see Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks? She went on a really big rant about like who's gonna watch kids, like if you, I don't know, if you can't get abortions or something like that. And I'm
Yep.
just like, I thought about like taking that clip and having like Anakin like from episode 3 when he's like about to kill the younglings. I'm just like you know, it's just not a good reason to just like to say you need abortion because someone has to watch kids when you go to work. Like you got to figure something out.
Right. And that's why the pro-life movement needs to step up to the plate and help to create a society in which people don't feel the need to have an abortion. There are all of these things in place to support women and families and like the family. The idea of creating an environment where you don't need two incomes. Like Elizabeth Warren talked about the two income trap, the idea that these days, you know, it's basically impossible to do anything without two incomes. That didn't used to be the case in our society. And I disagree with Elizabeth Warren about basically everything, but I do agree with her that that's a problem. And she and I would probably disagree about the solutions to fixing it. But pro-life people, Republicans, conservatives, whatever, all agree that we need to be creating a society that actually supports women and families. We may just disagree about the precise way to go about fixing the issue, but we all agree it's an issue.
Yeah. What do you think about like I mean, people will say things like you're not pro-life because you won't support like Medicare for all and all these kind of other different social. There's always like a list like if you don't support my free college, if you don't support my free healthcare, I'm like, it sounds like a bunch of stuff about you and not the baby, but okay. And they have their list of things, and I'm just so to me, I'm just like, okay, so you do believe that people have an obligation to one another, like that's what you're telling me, and I have an obligation to you. And you apparently have an obligation to other people, but it kind of seems like you're trying to pass a bill, but okay. Let's just assume we have an obligation to each other. I'm like, but you don't believe that a mother has an obligation to her baby?
Yeah. I think all of those things get away from the primary issue at stake here, which is the idea that the essential pro-life position is that the unborn are humans that should have the same right to life as you and I, and that while bodily autonomy is incredibly important, it doesn't give you the right to kill another person. And so my belief on that does not automatically mean I have to believe literally anything else.
Yeah.
Now, I do think there is something to say that pro-life people need to do a better job of pointing out the common ground that they do have on many of those other issues. A lot of times, like if someone gives me a laundry list of things that they think I don't agree with, there's at least one in there that I do. There's at least one place where I actually agree with them about poverty or about whatever. Like most conservatives have some common ground with a stereotypical person on the left, whether it's actually you do agree with a specific policy or you at least agree that it's a problem, whatever they're bringing up, even if you don't agree with their solution. And so one of the biggest practical dialogue tips that I teach pro-life people to do is to always start by pointing out those pieces of common ground, help them to see that we are not that different. And so I can point out, especially when I do talks on college campuses, I'll talk about the few positions I hold that do align more with people on the left. I will point those out. I will try to bring them up and show people that I am more like them than they thought. But then I also always bring it back to what abortion is and the fact that that as an issue is completely separate from all of these other things, because that is the active killing of another human. And all of these other things are related to how we treat humans. That is true, but they are not a human being killed. And so like logically they don't connect. There is no because you're pro-life you have to be XYZ, but there is a because you're pro-life you should care about people. I agree with that. The disagreement is usually how we should go about caring about people. What is best for people in policy? What is best for our society? That's where the disagreement lies.
Yeah, I learned something about Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, the other day. I was just researching some stuff. Found like an old article that was like things you need to know about Rand Paul. This was like maybe when he was running in 2015 or something, and NPR did like 5 facts or whatever. and it talked about how he like set up in 1995, they set up like a clinic or something for people to get like free eye surgery, like low income families get free exams, and he did at least like 100 pro bono like surgeries for people of low income. So people rip on him because he's like a libertarian-esque Republican, and people get mad when he says like healthcare is not a right, it's a commodity. You're not entitled to my labor, which he is an actual like position. It's like, you know, I need to be paid for my work or whatever. But he also in the article said he believes it's his Christian duty also to give back, and he said physicians have a responsibility to give back like that. So I'm like, so that's where the like the personal responsibility comes in. So just because I don't believe in like a big government overreach doesn't mean that I don't believe that you give back to people in need. I don't believe it's charitable actually when people confiscate your cash and redistribute it. I'm like, that's not actually charity. But do we have an obligation to each other? Yes, and I believe everyone believes that, but we just don't always believe in the same how to go about it. So that's where that discussion lies. But again, that's like a subsection that's not involved in whether or not the baby should, you know, survive or not.
But pointing that out, going and taking 2 minutes with a pro-choice person to explain what you just said, to explain this is where we agree. We agree that XYZ is a problem. I am like on the same page with you there. I'm guessing where we disagree is about how we'd actually go about solving poverty or the healthcare system or whatever. Just taking those few minutes to point out that common ground and start that conversation there, even though that's not the main point of our conversation. Our main point of our conversation is abortion. But being willing to take a moment and go on that little side tangent with them shows them that you're human, that you care, and suddenly it makes you more interesting to them. You seem like a real person who has thoughts and feelings and all of those things that like are obvious to us that we have, but sometimes they have these crazy stereotypes in their heads of who people on the conservative side are. And if you can take that minute when somebody gives you the long list of issues, go be willing to talk about one for a second, help them to see you from a different light. And then when you go back and talk about how it isn't related to abortion, they're going to hear you better.
No, I agree with that. It is amazing how people from the other side just don't believe people on the right have empathy. I'm like, that's very strange. But I like last summer I actually went to a picnic it was a Democrat Party picnic. I did not like announce that I was not a Democrat. I just showed up.
Sure.
And so I had conversations with people, and like a lot. I mean, there were things I didn't agree with some stuff, but like we just had normal conversations about family, and I did not deceive anyone. I'm like, yeah, my church is like not too far from here, etc. From a family, I write books and other stuff. And you just had normal conversations, but I overhear people talk about like, so they have no empathy. Like Trump has no empathy. I'm like, he cares about no one. I'm like, I know there's lots of reasons people don't like him. Like, you don't like his kids? I'm like, you don't like his wife? Like nobody? Like his longtime business partners? And then there was a Supreme Court justice in our state who got a Bernstein, and he's like, I love being a Democrat because we actually care about people. And I'm just like you don't believe like the others, like we don't care about our families, we don't care, and I'm having good conversations with people, and they can see I'm a human being, but they don't know that I think differently than them. And I'm just like, what if I wanted to just say like my dad's a Republican or something. Like, do you really think my dad doesn't love me? Like, but I didn't want to like blow my cover too much, so but it was just so wild to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in their defense, in the left's defense, so to speak, I do think that conservatives, many conservatives do a bad job of expressing the empathy that they have. I believe that they all have that empathy, but I think they often don't take the time to really demonstrate it in a way. Like there's so many kind of conservative slogans, talking points, like the classic facts don't care about your feelings type attitude that conservatives say a lot. And that does kind of give the impression that we don't have empathy. I know we do. And one of the biggest things that I worked on training pro-life people to do is whenever you're responding to a pro-choice person, whenever you're talking to a pro-choice person in your life, take that time to point out the common ground. Tell people you don't want women to die in abortions. Like that just so self-explanatory to us. Of course I don't want women to die in abortions. But oftentimes we forget to say that. And so you need to actually express the genuine compassion that you have for survivors of rape, for women who are in difficult financial situations, for women who are dying in abortions, who are like all of those people. We need to do a better job of not coming across as a facts don't care about your feelings attitude and saying, yes, here are the facts. I'm going to make an argument. But I also do care about your feelings, and I'm going to take a minute to listen to you. And I want to show you that I truly do care, and I'm trying to help you. Okay, now back to my argument.
Yeah, I think there are some people who don't have who literally don't care about your feelings. Like, 'cause there's some people who just have I want to be left alone sort of thing. But I don't think that's most people.
Right.
And you're right that people don't really convey
Express,
that. Like,
yeah.
I think like one argument we'd agree that people throw around a lot that will probably make you cringe is like, just keep your legs closed, you know. That and I hear that all the time. I can't say I've never uttered it. I can't say that. And maybe the more kind of frustration down the line sort of thing. But I even like that sort of mindset, you can explain that in a way that is like, here's why you should do that, or here's why I think it's better for society to build that nuclear family. Statistics on why that's better for society, why that's better for you, why that's better for the woman, why the child, the father. So you can go into those things and have those explanations without just like jumping to something like that. Like the if you're on the right, I'm going to assume it's not, you don't have that opinion just because you want to be left alone, but also because you believe that it's a good, moral, correct, logical decision. So take the time to explain the benefits of those good, logical decisions. Like when people bring up religion, which they do all the time in abortion arguments, which I don't, but other people do.
Yeah.
But just it's kind of more like a side note when people mention religion, and I'm just like, do you think I'm like, I go to church because I'm bored, because I need something to do? I'm like, I'm an introvert. I could be on my computer all day and be good or whatever. Like, I follow the Bible, the Word of God, and I'm a believer because I believe it's the truth, and I see it in my life, and it makes sense, and I can relate the benefits to those things. So if whatever your positions are, I hope you have them because they're logical and there's benefits to those positions, but other people can't see them a lot of times, and you need to take the time to explain them, because otherwise you're just I don't know, an emotionless bigot, I guess, to them. So
yeah, well said.
Okay, I don't want to keep it too long, so I'm gonna play one more. We could be for 2 hours.
One last TikTok. Let's do it.
One less TikTok. This one's crazy. Oh gosh, I had a couple, so let me think about it. Which one I want to play?
Oh boy! All right, I'm mentally preparing myself.
Okay, okay, let me play him. This is a big account, Blackout. So he said some weird stuff.
All right.
You know, the irony is not lost on me that pro-lifers are fighting like their lives depended on it to bring babies into a world and a country that is bordering on uninhabitable. We can't pay rent, minimum wage is 29 quarters, concerning amount of Americans are a hardship away from homelessness. God forbid I come down with a terminal illness, I'll need a bank loan to pay for the medical expenses. The country is horny for nuclear war. Miss Climate Change is on the way to get us out the paint and put us on a t-shirt as soon as she sees fit. So pro-lifers, there is no scenario in which y'all do not come out of this looking like total dweebs.
Yeah, so are any of those valid reasons to have an abortion, would you say?
No. I think I always start with responding to something like that with a model. A lot of pro-life people use, it's called trot of a toddler. Anytime someone brings up like a difficult situation that they think should justify an abortion, whether that's the environment or the economy, or someone being born into a household where they're going to be unwanted, or it's going to be in poverty, something like that. Like anytime there's a difficult circumstance, which is basically what he just did. He just listed off a whole bunch of difficult circumstances that he think would justify the need to have abortion. I always respond with this kind of 4-step process called trot of a toddler. And the first step, we've talked about it so much tonight, it's finding common ground. I would talk about with this individual, what I do agree with. I don't want anyone to be born into difficult situations. I certainly don't want anyone being born into a nuclear war, if that's truly, like, I'm basically going to assume he's correct that all those things are going to happen. I don't want any of that to happen. Obviously, I don't want 1 million people to be homeless. I don't want all of those things. And then I would move on and I would say, and literally the second step is, can I ask you kind of a weird question?
Me?
And I would basically,
pro-choice
person.
Okay.
That's the second step. Can I ask you kind of a weird question? I'm just teaching you pro-life apologetics here in a nutshell. Then I would move on to step 3, which is essentially I'm going to create a parallel situation. I want to try to figure out whether or not this difficult circumstance that he listed would justify killing a toddler. Spoiler alert, it never does. And so I would talk about how, none of those particular reasons, and I would maybe even build up a whole hypothetical scenario. You'll see me do this a lot on my TikTok about, let's say, a family that's living in poverty and they're really struggling to make ends meet, and they really, like, all of the agencies that are supposed to be helping them, the government agencies, the local agencies, the nonprofits, like everything that's supposed to be set up to help them right now just isn't, or incapable of it. And so would that be an okay reason? I'm guessing we'd agree, me and pro-choice person, it would not be okay for them to kill their toddler to help with what is legitimately a really difficult situation. Obviously not. When they say no to that, I move on to step 4, which is basically to describe the logic, where I explain that I have this view that the fetus and the toddler have the same moral status. They have the same right to life. They should be treated equally under the law. And therefore, anytime somebody brings up like a difficult situation that they think should justify abortion, I have to ask myself, would that be an okay reason to kill a toddler? Because remember, I think they're equal. I don't think there's any good reasons to kill toddlers. So if I'm right about that, then I think we need to do all the things we can to fix all those eventualities that you talked about. We want to try to not have a nuclear war, and we should be trying to fix homelessness and all of those things. But I don't think that any of those are an okay reason to have an abortion, because I don't think they'd be an okay reason to kill a toddler. Come back at me here, pro-choice person. And they will inevitably respond by saying, that makes sense, but I think your analogy is completely off because fetuses and toddlers aren't the same thing. Cool. I'm happy. Now we can get down to the root of the abortion debate. They basically have to identify for me why they think that fetuses and toddlers are not the same. And then we can go actually talk about that and get off of the distracting other side issues and onto the root of the debate. Basically, what Trot on a Toddler does is it takes us from that place that he was in of all of these eventualities and puts it into what are we really talking about here. And so I think, I have no idea if we're truly on the brink of nuclear war or any of the things that he talked about. I certainly think that putting abortion, making abortion illegal will cause some additional financial hardships for people. I don't deny that at all. I cannot sit here and predict exactly what the world is going to look like with all the bajillion things he mentioned. But I can say I don't think that any of those are acceptable reasons to kill people. But at the same time, here's another call to pro-lifers. Let's step up to the plate and let's do everything we can to create a society in which no one feels desperate to have an abortion, because we've got the systems in place to support women and support families and support everyone, regardless of whether we agree on how to put those policies in place. Like, let's have those conversations. Let's figure out what to do and let's do it. Let's step up to that plate.
Do you feel, it'll put some people in some hardship, maybe like immediately, like people maybe have to get used to the idea, but I just assume that it would just, and I can't remember his name, his TikTok handle, but Ben is his real name. But he did a really good like breakdown of why, of some data of basically people would be more careful as far as if abortion was illegal. So I think
absolutely
it would just kind of make a more responsible population of people. So I don't know if the economic thing is going to really bear out, but also like poor people are really, really resilient, and life is not linear. Like it changes. Like one year, my oldest sister, she was working security at a GM plant, and then like 2 years later, she's getting, she was at a high up position at the RNC, like going across the world, like as their outreach director for women engagement and urban engagement. So it's like you don't know how vastly different your world can be. When I was a kid, we lived in a trailer park, and my mom was like, "It's a manufactured home community." Is you know, it's like, you gotta say it like that. I'm like, okay, mom. And it seems so hard. It was so tough for us to pay that rent. One year, like actually it was a couple years for Christmas, like we could all sing, and so they knock off money from our park rent if we would like perform for the Christmas party. So we would do
Amazing.
that. So, but I was like, but a couple years ago I was working out in Lansing, and so I actually got a place myself that was a similar size, not as big as like, it was like a 2-bedroom manufacturer home, but it was like better than like all the other renting options and stuff. But I'm like, I'm paying the same thing I'm paying by myself that what my whole family struggled for all of us to live in. And I'm like, life can just so vastly change. And it's just, like I said earlier, it's just such a bizarre, unjustified reason to take a life. And I don't know how many hood women they know, like with their food stamps, and like I know somebody who's using their child support and all this stuff, put themselves through schools. She's like a law degree and all the other. I'm like, we're so resourceful. Like we know how to survive. So it just it's.
I don't think that argument gives those people enough credit. That's absolutely true. I think you're also very right that if abortion isn't available, people are going to be way more sexually responsible, which everyone wants. Plenty of people, I have so many conversations with people on the left, and they want people to be sexually responsible. They don't want people having sex before they're ready. They want people to use protection correctly, and all they've been advocating for responsibility in sex ed and all of those things forever. Everyone can agree we want people to be more responsible. But at the same time, I do still think there will be people that are going to have more children than perhaps they're ready or able to at that moment. Just from a lot of people also say we don't have statistics on what happens when abortion becomes illegal. We do. We have plenty of statistics about what happens when abortion is extremely restricted and or becomes illegal in an area. Shout out again to Secular Pro-Life, because they are also my go-to source for these resources. But they have plenty of statistics about how basically in any area where abortion becomes highly restricted or very much less available, birth rates do go up. In other words, people can't have a secret birth. They can have a secret abortion, hypothetically, but they can't have a secret birth. So we can look at the birth rates to see how does this correlate with places where you suddenly make abortion much less available. Are there more children being born? And the answer is yes. It's not some crazy amount. It's not all of the abortions are suddenly turning into births, because a lot more people are being responsible with having sex. But there is a jump in the birth rate, and I do think we will see a small one. And so we do need to provide resources to those families to help them. And yes, we need to encourage them to be resourceful and do all of those things that your amazing family sounds like they did. But we can also be there to support them. We should do that. I think we have an obligation to do that, to create those support systems. But I also think there is an overblown idea that there are going to be so many more children being born, when you're right. A lot of more people are going to be sexually responsible, which everyone agrees is a good thing.
And if there's sexually more responsible, like I know like the Brookings Institute once said, like, you could do 3 things and you won't be like permanent. Generally, if you do these things, I'm going to say for like everybody, but you won't be permanently poor in the United States. And that's like graduate high school, get a job, keep a job, and don't have sex until you're married. Like, not sex until you're married, but like don't have like babies outside of marriage. And if you do those 3 things, it's likely that you will not be permanently poor in the United States. So if there are people just making some more decisions like, hey, I don't want to get knocked up in grad school or high school or whatever, and especially to somebody I don't think is father material, and they kind of are being more responsible at the end of the day, if they have that nuclear family, which other guys seem like so appalled by, it's going to create a better society. It's going to create a better community, and a more stable one, in a better country. So I think ultimately, it'll be a good thing, if not just for the fact that we won't be taking the lives of the unborn. Just one more question. So
sure.
How do you get people to make the connection that the baby in the womb is the same as a toddler?
So there's two primary reasons that someone might think the fetus is not the same as the toddler. Either they're essentially having a personhood claim grounding their view, or a bodily autonomy claim. In other words, they think the fetus and the toddler aren't the same because the toddler is a person like you or I. It's out here, it's living, it's breathing, it's thinking, it's sentient, it's all of those things. And a fetus is not a person. They usually aren't talking about biology. A lot of pro-life people think they're talking about a biological difference. Some are. They don't think that the unborn is biologically human, but that's pretty rare these days. Most pro-choice people will concede that it is biologically human. They're making a personhood claim. They're talking about philosophy of what makes something valuable, what makes something need to have rights, what makes it a person. So there's that category, and then the other category is the bodily autonomy, where they say, I am going to concede, at least for the sake of argument, that the fetus is a person that should have rights. But I still think that you have the right to have an abortion because of the rights that women have to their bodies. And that's kind of this evictionism, right to refuse, and or my body, my choice. Because it's inside my body, I get to decide what happens category. So whenever I make that kind of trot out a toddler final move, and I say that I think that the two are the same, the fetus and the toddler, they basically have to identify for me which camp they're in. Are they in the personhood camp? Are they going to tell me I don't think they're the same because the fetus isn't a person yet? It's not living, thinking, breathing, all whatever those things. Or I think they're different because the fetus is inside the woman's body. It's completely dependent on her body. It's feeding off of her, whatever. So those are the two main categories of pro-choice arguments that I identify. And once I know which one the pro-choice person's camping in, then there's a different set of arguments that I'm going to go down in order to help them understand why the fetus and the toddler actually are the same. In this case, understand why the fetus has personhood. In this case, understand why bodily autonomy is not a relevant difference, why bodily autonomy does not give you the right to kill. And so to answer your question, I would have to go down both tracks of arguments entirely, because there's two different ways that a pro-choice person might be thinking about this. And that's primarily what Equal Rights Institute's content specializes in, is how do I understand these two categories and all the things that could go off of them. And so really, I would say the short answer to how to respond to a pro-choice person, how to get them to see that fetus and the toddler are the same, is to first find out why they think they aren't the same. And then two, learn the arguments that correspond to that specific direction. And we have all of that on all of our channels. You can go look at it, find it. We have blog articles. We'll teach you all step by step each of the two different routes of what to say and how to say it for each direction, to really be able to respond to where they're coming from once you know why they think the fetus and the toddler are not the same.
There was one pretty big pro-choice content person, and I don't think their page initially started that way, but they started talking about that kind of other stuff, and they talk about sex worker rights and all kinds. It's I don't know,
all over the place.
All over the place. But eventually she did a lot live, and I caught it, that about how she decided that she was going to be pro-life, and she was kind of still working out her arguments, her issues and stuff about it. But people are asking, like, this is such a shock. Like, why did you change it? So she's just like, I can't deny anymore that the unborn is like the same as a toddler, like a newborn. Like, it doesn't make any sense to not see them in the same sort of way. So
yeah,
I mean, I guess there's probably some people at the end of the day who still say they don't care regardless. And to them, I'm just like, well, you just gotta be mad, and abortion's gotta be banned, and you can just be angry. Like, I don't know what to do with you after that. But I do really think that getting people to see that humanity there is really the big fight. I mean, that's why people say, someone came up to me, I was at a Juneteenth event, and they had a clipboard, and they're like, hey, you want to sign for reproductive rights? And I kind of blew them off. I was like, no, because it's systemic racism is what I said. But then they were like, okay. And they just like left and stuff kind of awkwardly. I'm like, no. But they call it reproduction rights, and they will have any sort of conversation that just ignores the humanity of the child at all. And so when I have conversations with people, I didn't want to get into a big thing. He was signing petitions. I know how that works. So I wasn't about to get to a thing with him, but I don't have a conversation with people unless they will acknowledge, like, I'm not going to just pretend like that's not a human being. Like, we're going to have that conversation.
Right.
And So I that's what I suggest to people, like, not, you're not gonna have like a 20-minute debate and not acknowledge that that's a human being.
Oh,
And
absolutely. And most pro-choice people, when you ask them, are acknowledging that it's biologically human. They're making a more philosophical claim that it's not philosophically a person, which I do believe is probably the most important thing that I do in all of my conversations about abortion. Even if they're a person making that bodily autonomy claim, we're still going to have to go talk about what the unborn is and whether it deserves equal rights like you and I do, whether all members of our species should deserve equal rights, or whether there are certain members of our species that it's okay to discriminate against, which is obviously a very specific way of framing the thought process in order to kind of help expose the issues with denying certain humans equal protection from violence.
Yeah, I mean, lastly, I just want to say that I mean, the only difference between, like, I got to see my nephew. I was trying to see sonograms with my nieces and nephews forever, and I really wanted to see him be born, but COVID got me, and other times things happen, but didn't get me, but restrictions and stuff.
Yeah.
But I got to take my sister to a sonogram. I saw my nephew's a couple months now. I don't remember how many now, but a bad auntie. But I got to see him at 14 weeks, and I was just like, I couldn't believe how much like movement and other things at that point of time it was, and got to see other later sonograms. So I'm like, people don't realize, like, the only difference between him there and when I got to hold him in my arms is just simply time. Just time to develop. I got to make a really good video about that. I have one in mind, but that's for another day. But thank you for joining me tonight. Don't want to keep you too long, but where can people find you again?
This has been a pleasure, Christina. Thank you so much. You can find Equal Rights Institute, our website, equalrightsinstitute.com. We are at Equal Rights Institute on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We also have a huge YouTube channel where we're constantly putting out pro-life content, helping you respond to different arguments. We also have a blog on our website, same exact thing. We have a podcast, which I co-host, called the Equip for Life podcast. All of those places are your go-to for whenever you have a pro-choice argument you're trying to figure out how to respond to. We have material for you. I guarantee it.
All right. And I suggest you guys go look at that. Go look at other links that she talked about. They're a wealth of knowledge. They do have good sources. You are pleasurable addition to TikTok, and that's full of stuff. There's so much bad content on TikTok. But it's like, you got to be there right now. You just kind of got to be there. But it's good to have good people in the fight. If you guys want to know more about blacktnews.com, you can go to the website, check out different things that you have on there. If you'd like to support, you can go to blacktnews.com/donate. We got good shirts you guys can check out, like the I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For shirt. Really like that one. And the My Money by Business, which I made that after I was annoyed with people kept saying that abortion's not my business. I'm like, you want my tax dollars, you want all this stuff. So that's where that idea came from. And of course, we got 4th of July coming up, and we got Frederick Douglass. The Constitution is a glorious liberty document. So check out different stuff that we have on the website. And you guys can find me on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. All my handles are at Black Tea News, with the exception of Twitter. That one is at True Black Tea, but all my links are in the description. Thank you so much, Emily, for stopping by.
And, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I had a blast, so I hope to have you back soon.
I would love that.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us tonight, and I'll see you Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern time for Black Tea News.